We started Switch4Good with the vision to disrupt societal norms around dairy foods. Big Dairy has been lying to all of us for far too long, and we are here to set the record straight. It's our mission to address the destruction caused by this non-essential industry that's robbing us of our health, robbing mother cows of their calves, and robbing our children of a safe, equitable future. We battle Big Dairy by creating widespread change through our 4 pillars: improved human health, enhanced everyday performance, dietary justice, and planetary responsibility. Whether it's educating the public with our innovative billboard and digital campaigns, fighting to get millions of underprivileged children plant-based milk in schools, working to change food policy at corporations like Starbucks and the International Olympic Committee, we're educating millions of people about the benefits of ditching dairy. Your generous tax-deductible donations fuel our trailblazing campaigns and help us keep the hard-earned positive momentum going. Mark my word, dairy will be the first animal-based food to topple, setting a cascade effect for all others to follow. Don't you want to be a part of this monumental effort? We need your support to move the needle, though, and change millions more lives. Won't you donate now to change the world for good? No amount is too small. Thank you for all you do, and happy holidays. Hello, all of you out there. Welcome to the Switch4Good podcast. I am Dotsie, and I'm here along with my amazing co-host, Alexandra. And you know, as we head into the holiday season with all the nuttiness and insanity, I personally find it harder and harder to be mindful. And I'm wondering if you do too. So I thought I would start today's pod with 5 reminders on how to stay mindful. Do let me know if they're helpful for you. All right, number 1, we're going to start with acknowledgement. When you first begin your practice, you can start by acknowledging the divinity within you and around you. Are you invoking an ascended master, the energy of the earth, or your highest self? You may know exactly who you want to invoke, or you may call just to the very highest vibrations that you're feeling. There is no right or wrong, so feel free to communicate with any source that calls to you. Number 2 is practicing gratitude. Seems so simple, but I find it complicated sometimes. But you could start your prayer with gratitude, and it does allow you to feel more aligned. There is always something to be grateful for. From the smallest to the largest wins, you have something to appreciate and something to be proud of. So practice gratitude. Number 3 is practicing acceptance. Now, acceptance creates space and ease for new possibilities. During your practice, reflect on how you can release resistance, even if it's just for today or just for that moment of practice. Consider how your current situation might be of your highest good. How are things working out for your best interest? What might you have to learn from this experience? Number 4, set intentions. Intentions create an imprint for reality. You can ask for help and guidance in any way you may need it. Visualize who you want to be. Affirm how you would like to feel. Ask for the support you need. There's no limit to the help you can receive. Ask for your mind to be illuminated, your body to be supported, and your soul to be enlightened. And number 5 is the hardest one for me: surrender. You may receive exactly what you asked for, or even something better. Imagine that. Be open to the possibilities. Trust the journey and trust that you will be guided. Relinquish the idea of safety. All right. I hope you all enjoyed hearing those and they were helpful. Now we're going to move on to our guest to learn even more about practicing mindfulness, because she is an expert. She is truly an extraordinary human. I love this episode.
I just remember that's when the battle started to begin and the shame started to begin. So I remember before weigh-ins, like I would go bike for 60 minutes and then go sit in the sauna for 30 minutes and then just not drink water. And I would just have all these different things I would do just to make the weight because I was still eating poorly.
Our guest today is certified health coach and chef, Becca Serenity. Becca suffered from depression, anxiety, and a crippling eating disorder as a college athlete. But after 5 years of yo-yo dieting and binging, She changed her mindset and took control of her own healing journey. She lost 70 pounds and reclaimed her life. Now, Becca guides others to take their mental, emotional, and physical well-being to new heights. Becca was also a superstar basketball player in her Arizona high school and was inducted in the Tolleson Basketball Hall of Fame, among many, many other accolades. She went to the University of Nebraska on a full scholarship, and when she transferred to San Jose State, she set free throw and three-point records. She's currently an assistant basketball coach at Yavapai College in Arizona. Becca also has her own health coaching business and specializes in helping professionals transform their health so they can live their best lives. So, if you're ready to change your relationship with food and be the best version of yourself, you're definitely going to want to stay tuned to hear our conversation with the next rising star in the wellness space. Welcome to the show, Becca.
Oh, thank you. That was really such a nice introduction. So thank you, Alexandra.
So let's start from the beginning. I talked a little bit about your college career, but let's go back farther. When you were growing up, you did not learn how to eat healthily. So give us an idea of sort of what you and your family were eating.
Yeah. And believe it or not, my mom, she actually went to culinary school when I was younger, and she had aspired to open up a bakery shop. So you would think that we may have had better options with that knowledge that she had. And by in no means am I knocking my mom, right? My mom had me when she was younger and, at 18. So she was doing the best that she could to raise me at that time. So looking back, breakfasts looked like Pop-Tarts, Eggos, eggs, bacon, lots of cereal, right? Go-Gurts and sausage patties. And when I think about lunches and dinners, I mean, that was primarily meat-based at the time. And I'm pretty sure at that time it wasn't free range or grass-fed, what have you, which is what people try to do when they do eat meat. So I know we had a lot of, sandwiches and wraps with deli meats and frozen, what were those called? Frozen fish sticks and frozen corn dogs. But the general meals that I think that were like the most wholesome growing up were probably, chili and cornbread, tacos with like the store-bought taco shells with red meat. But, with my brother and I being athletes and being involved with sports, we ate out a lot, right? We're constantly on the go, late practices or what have you. So we would eat out a lot at regular fast food chains like Subway, McDonald's, Taco Bell, Papa John's, Church's Chicken. And in Arizona, we have a lot of fast food Mexican restaurants. So like there's places like Filiberto's and Romero's, so real greasy looking back. But and then outside of that, just regular snacks that the kids unfortunately still eat today. So, hot Cheetos, Cheez-Its, Wheat Thins, we thought were healthy at that time, right? Wheat Thins, Costco fruit snacks, microwave popcorn, and then of course like desserts like drumsticks and push pops. So that was like the bulk of what I was eating and my parents were eating. And yeah, so that was pretty much the bulk of what that looked like for me.
I really relate to your story that when you went to college, you gained a lot of weight that you did not want to gain. And your childhood is so similar to mine in terms of the food, right? It was just like kind of sign of the times. Mom was doing her very best. She thought that, iceberg lettuce and ranch dressing and hot dogs and macaroni and cheese was perfectly healthy. Yeah. And so I never really, I think I thought 1 second about food until, like you, went to college and gained a lot of weight that I realized I didn't want to gain. Share your story of that happening with us.
Yeah. So when I got to college, I was probably about 150 to 155 pounds. So, and I went with those same eating habits, Dotsie, that you mentioned, right? So in one of my preseason workouts, before the season had even started, I suffered from an injury, a very severe ankle sprain where it really was going to put me out. And with that, I wasn't able to be as active as I would have liked. And with those eating habits, and within a month's time, I was able to gain some weight. So I was hovering around my mid 170s. And my coach made it very apparent to me that, hey, you need to lose this weight. And she didn't do it in the best of ways, which is a whole nother story. But so with that, I was still kind of, because I didn't have like self-conscious or self-love issues when I was younger. So when that kind of came to me, like, you need to lose weight, like this is what you have to do, it kind of just threw me off. But I was like, okay, well, if I want to play, I have to lose weight. So I started working with the sports nutritionist, and she, kind of introduced me to like, here, these are the types of things you should put on your plate. This is your portion sizes, things like that. And I started meeting with her weekly and doing weigh-ins. And this is where kind of like the struggle began, because I wasn't really good at kind of knowing how to include those unhealthy foods that I was constantly and used to eating into my diet. So I just remember that's when the battle started to begin and the shame started to begin. So I remember before weigh-ins, like I would go bike for 60 minutes and then go sit in the sauna for 30 minutes and then just not drink water. And I would just have all these different things I would do just to make the weight, because I was still eating poorly. And then I just didn't know how to handle that. So that's really where that started. And then when that became a thing, now it was like, okay, Becca's stressed. So I ended up seeing a sports psychologist, and I was working with him, but ultimately it didn't really help. And then it just kind of led to me having this continuous binge eating cycle. And my coach didn't quite understand until it was later expressed, but that was ultimately what the journey looked like. And it really just stemmed from me not having a relationship with food going into college and really seeing food as fuel. It was just this type of relationship I had because of just how I was raised and how my family was around food and things like that. So,
yeah. Will you share how your coach asked you? There's probably people listening who have no experience with an eating disorder.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for them. Right. And I had a similar experience as you too with how they shared, probably with the best intentions, but so that people can learn, if they have an athlete that they coach or a kid, that they're going, I think there's some problem here, or they just think maybe, okay, it's not healthy to be whatever, quote, overweight. And how might they best share it so that it can be received in a more constructive way, right? Because you and I kind of spiraled in the wrong direction.
Yeah, no, definitely.
From that, information that they gave us that we needed to shed a few.
Yeah. And trust me, with what you're saying, I think about other sports that when weight is really a factor, like my husband, he was in wrestling. So I'm like, he tells me his stories, right? So, and I'm like, basketball, it's not really the first sport you think where you need to lose weight. So with that, the approach that she came with was, very frank. You need to lose the weight, but it was just the way I was questioned about it. Like, the first point was like, are you pregnant? That was like the approach.
Oh, wow.
I ended up leaving this school, by the way, for reasons, but there was just the wrong direction. So I won't go into all the negatives that I experienced with the way she approached it, but I will focus on the solution and how a coach should handle it. And that's why now with where I'm at with the girls that I work with, I really make myself available to them, and I, let them know it's a lot. I would say it's a lot easier for me having gone through it. So I have about 3 players right now that have their own struggles. One of them is specifically dealing with a binge eating disorder, right? So for me, it's about making myself available to talk to. They're vulnerable enough to share that with me. And then it's, okay, here's my story. And now you don't have to feel like this is forever. It doesn't have to last forever. Change is possible. And if it's super severe, I might ask them, I'll share, maybe go to a professional, but I always share my best tips because I was able to heal myself without a professional. So whether that's for them, journaling. So one of my players, with her specifically, it's like, okay, we're going to start journaling. I want you to start to see what you're eating. And it's okay to write down what you did during your binge. It's okay. And I know you might feel a lot of shame behind it, but it's okay because you're going to make a mistake. And while you're fighting this, it's going to happen again. And that's okay. And then it's about, okay, when the binge happens, what are your triggers? What are the emotions behind it? And then kind of walking them through that. But my biggest thing with my approach with these young girls, knowing that they're going through these things that we had gone through as well, is helping them love themselves, introducing them into self-care practices, because all of that happens because of that lack of self-love and that lack of understanding with food. So that's typically my approach. Like we do like weekly yoga sessions with them. We host like book clubs with them where we're going over a book, one of my favorite personal freedom books, which is 4 Agreements, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. So just helping them get to know themselves better, to love themselves a little bit more, so that now it's like, okay, let me think about this relationship that I have with food as well. You know, what are the emotions that are causing me to do these things to myself? Because we all know it's that self-sabotaging thing. And what is it stemming from? So with people that may not have my background and are talking to kids, I would definitely say, allow them to talk to you and be extremely non-judgmental. I think the problem is people might share something, and then someone that has no background in it might just say, well, that's not serious, or that's not a disorder, or whatever the case may be. But just listening is the biggest tip I can give. Really being a safe space so that they can like share what they're going through. So
we always say on this show that it's not what you're eating, it's what's eating you, really. Yeah. And people focus too much on the food per se, like what are you eating? When are you eating it? How much are you eating? When someone comes to them with an eating disorder, when actually that is just a symptom of a deeper pain or discomfort. By the way, I love the 4 agreements. Dotsie, that's the book where I think I mentioned once, they have he has basically 4 tenets of life.
Be impeccable with your word. Don't take things personally. Always do your best. And don't make assumptions, and that'll prevent a lot of suffering. So
yes. Yeah. And Becca, the story I tell about that book is that I'd heard so much about that book, and I picked it up and I look and I see the 4 agreements, and I'm like, don't take things personally. Out of all the things that you could be telling, you're saying that's the thing. And I read the book and I'm, wow, that was the most important to me, actually, interestingly. Such an important one. Although don't make assumptions is probably pretty good too. Becca, can you share with us a little bit about how, if the food, you were triggered by a comment from your coach? Funny, I was also triggered by a comment from a boy I liked who said, you weigh too much. And I was like, wow, no one's ever told me that. I started looking at myself completely differently. Yeah. And then the focus became on food, something I never thought about really. So it's interesting how these little comments can make a huge shift in our lives. Yeah. But what was going on with you, though, that it affected you? Because as we said, it's often not about the food. It can be partly about the food. If all of a sudden you're told to restrict food and you never have, it can kind of put us in a crazy loop. Yeah. But was there other things going on? Because you did go through, binge eating and yo-yo dieting for a long time.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that and it's funny because when I dealt with that, when I ended up leaving that school, I remember having conversations with my dad, and I was like, Dad, I'm still dealing with this. And he's like, well, then it wasn't that coach, because at first it was like, you're kind of blaming the coach. There was issues of her own, but it wasn't that she's the reason I'm dealing with this. Like you said, it was something that I was dealing with. And I think it kind of stems from also what my players deal with. It's maybe navigating a lot of different changes, being in that new environment, and feeling just the stressors of being the student athlete away from home and having to do things a certain way. But to your point about the food, I think it also just came down to the restrictions and really just not knowing how to succeed. Even though I had this nutritionist who, super awesome woman, I must say, even though I had her, I still wasn't able to connect the dots. And that's why my philosophy in general, it's about what's going on inside. And for me at that time, I think it was a lot of just the stress of being hurt. I mean, Dotsie, right? Being hurt as an athlete, it's like one of the worst things ever. Mm-hmm. So I think the stress of being not able to play, not being able to lose the weight, that was probably the biggest thing. And then to your point with the binge eating and then turning into yo-yo dieting, that was where the real journey began. Because once I finally stopped binge eating, I was like, oh, thank God, I haven't had an episode in so long. It was just like, okay, but now I still don't have this relationship with food. The weight's coming off and everything's good, but I'm still backtracking, and it's figuring out what I'm supposed to be eating. And I think the biggest thing for me was focusing on what made my body feel good. And that's how I was able to conquer the yo-yo dieting, trying different foods, figuring out, okay, for example, with dairy, I'm lactose intolerant, right? And it was figuring out, after not having dairy for a while, okay, why do I feel like this, so to speak, right? So I was able to put 2 and 2 together and say, oh, I don't want to feel like this, and I don't want to have to take a pill to feel like I can eat this. Yeah. And my body's rejecting it. So it's a no for me. But it's about figuring those things out with all foods, because all of our bodies are different as well.
Yeah. I find that does help to think, how am I going to feel in the morning?
Yes.
Yeah.
And projecting and going, maybe not. It sort of tempers that immediate high of eating something that it tastes good in the moment, or eating a large amount, which feels good in the moment, but in the morning you're going to not feel so good. So you lost 70 pounds. You did that partly by journaling. And what are some other things that you did that you can help with our audience who might be dealing with the same issues as, sort of the same issues as you?
Yeah. So when it comes to the weight that I've lost, and if you're mentioning what are some of the main things that I would recommend with just losing weight or just overcoming that pain? Is that what you're kind of getting at?
I think both, because
Okay.
if you lose the weight, it'll come back on if you haven't overcome the pain or dealt with the pain,
Yes.
right? And vice versa. The pain will remain if the food is out of control.
So I think that things that they can do right now, the major things, number one would be consider documentaries or books that can help, right? So for me, when I first got introduced to Fast Food Nation, that just completely shifted my mindset. And it really comes back to the mindset, finding things that are going to shift your mindset, open up you to things that you hadn't considered. And even documentaries like Fed Up, for example, that's one thing that I would recommend. Another thing that I would recommend is really just when it comes to food and weight loss is it's not as we make it into rocket science. There's a lot of confusion around food, but my number two would just be really consuming more whole foods. Find whole foods that you like. So if it's strawberries or pineapple, great, eat more of those things. And then, introduce things that maybe you're skeptical about. Like I have family members that, they won't touch quinoa with a stick, right? So it's like, go ahead, continue to eat rice, but hey, there's a lot of benefits to eating quinoa. So try something new, even things that you might be skeptical of, just trying new foods that maybe you've never had, because we all grew up in a kind of a box of what we had exposure to eating. So that'd be my number two, is just being open to trying new whole foods that you haven't had exposure to, and then eat more of what you already enjoy. I would say another tip that I would give on, just what people can change right now would be really eliminating the amount of ultra processed foods. And I know we hear it time and time again, but and it's not our fault, right? I think there's a recent study that was done that said that the adolescents and children that are under the age of 18 in the United States of America get 67% of their food consumption from ultra processed foods. So with that being the case, that goes to show that we have to respect the fact that that's how we grew up, and now you're growing out of it. And it kind of goes back to that. So those are like three main things that I would recommend, right? I would say, one, expose yourself to new documentaries and books that can help you grow. Two, be open to consuming more whole foods that you already enjoy, maybe ones that you've been kind of skeptical about trying. And then three would be truly doing your best to eliminate ultra processed foods. Now, we're human. There might be things that you have occasionally, but if your day is consisting of a lot of packaged foods and you have to read food labels constantly, that's something to take into consideration. Plus, it can be really fun to get creative in the kitchen and try to make new foods.
Your struggles lasted a while. They lasted 5 years or a little more. And speaking about number two, putting in more whole foods, I'm curious as to how you think because the trigger was you in the state that you were in, the coach saying something.
Yeah.
But then you continued, right, with your eating disorder, and depression came in, anxiety came in. How do you feel like those whole foods had a positive effect on really turning you around as a whole person, including not just losing the weight, but the depression and anxiety? Do you think they played a role? I
feel like over time, the whole foods played a role, because it allowed me to reignite my relationship with food. So I think during the process, it was really about falling back in love with food again, instead of food being this enemy that I don't understand. And with the healing process, over that 5-year journey, it was gradual, right? So the depression stemmed from me feeling like it was never going to change. And in order for change to have taken place, it came down to me saying that I believed it was possible for myself. And I think that only that ties to both people that are struggling with eating disorders and people who are just struggling within their weight loss journey in general, because it really comes back to you believing that it's possible for yourself to make that change. And then from there, it's about honoring, okay, what don't I know that I now need to figure out? Do I need to get help? And that was my approach, right? I was like, okay, I need to get help. But after college, not having access to the luxuries that school had for me with a nutritionist and a sports psychologist, right? Seeking out those things on my own, those things were, $300 an hour for a session. And at that time for me, that wasn't affordable. So I had to take it upon myself. So with healing myself, it turned out to be okay. Trying out new foods and figuring out the best ways to make those foods. And, that's also why I, became a yoga instructor. It was to nurture that mind, body, spirit, and developing a meditation practice. Those little things I did on my own was to help kind of bring me back whole. Because, our school system doesn't teach us these things. So, that was just really a part of my journey. And even that's what ignited my passion to go to culinary school and become a plant-based chef. And then after that, I said, okay, I want to further my education in this. And I went to a program within Escoffier, is more accredited program where I learned even more knowledge about how to make foods actually taste good, because I think that was the key. How do I not deprive myself of the things that I enjoy? How can I use whole foods, prepare them in a way that actually is nourishing for my body with what my body needs, but also tastes good? So that was truthfully my approach to how I used whole foods to help with the depression and anxiety. And I'll say, I'm a really big believer that what we eat plays has a huge impact on how we think and how we feel and how our mind works. And I just feel like there's not enough studies done on that personally, because there is a huge connection there. And I think that it's missing.
I agree with you totally. When I eat really well, my mood is just more even. If you hadn't gotten injured and gained a little bit of weight and that coach hadn't talked to you, do you think you might have had an eating disorder anyway? Because you exhibit some of the very typical things like smart, type A, driven, competitive, all that a perfectionist, maybe that a lot of women with eating disorders have, or young women, girls and women. I, having had being anorexic and then bulimic, when I went to Overeaters Anonymous, the rooms were filled with white women, and you're a woman of color. And I'm wondering, I always was under the impression, and now I know I'm wrong, that we all express our pain in different ways. And that white girls express it by eating disorders, a lot of times restricting, because in the white culture, being thin, certainly in my family, I was getting messages that thin was better and fat was not good. And because I was such a people pleaser, that's why I picked food and not drugs or shopping or whatever to deal with my pain. So now I have 3 Black friends who struggle with food that I know in my circle. So I know that was not true. But can you talk a little bit to that? And if you think that perhaps you would have, even if you hadn't been under such stress from your coach, if you might have just had an eating disorder because of your temperament and society?
Yeah, no, great questions. And I'll touch the first one first.
Yeah, sorry, I put a whole bunch.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's good, because I've never been asked that. I think my dad has hinted at it before and we've had discussions, but honestly, this is me unpacking this lifetime for the first time. And to be very honest with you both, like, I'm so happy, believe it or not, that it happened to me at that age, that young, because I look back and I'm like, thank goodness I didn't have to deal with this in like my late 30s or my late 40s and be going through this type of struggle. I'm just happy that I was able to beat it earlier than later, because to your point, with my personality, right, and being, perfectionist, right, it's like, you want things to be a certain way, and we're hard on ourselves. We're typically our biggest critics. So I could have totally seen if I didn't have to go through that, and I still had that, superstar high school career that I had at the college level. And then after that, I didn't then now experience it, because I still had those eating habits. I never grew. I never was still developing that relationship with my food. So again, to your point, it was one of those things where better then than later. To your point about the beauty ideal, I was personally never concerned about being super thin. I think that in the Black community, a lot of it is like, you want to be thick. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but it's like, you want to be thick, like think Meg the Stallion, Nicki Minaj, like that's like the image a lot of Black girls, not speaking for the whole community, but that's oftentimes what people are striving for. So for me, it was never about like, I didn't strive to be thick, and I didn't have this aspiration to be super thin. I was really just like, I want to be strong. I want to be lean, and I think that just kind of stemmed from me being an athlete at the time too. Like it was just always having that validation that my body was good enough to be able to play. And it's interesting because with hindsight now, I see so many players at different levels that have different bodies that do just fine. It just happened to be in that case that I wasn't good enough because of my size at the time. So, but however, when you talk about the culture, growing up, like to your point, I remember because I grew up in West Phoenix, which was, more middle class, lower class. I remember when I would have like club games out in East Phoenix, there'd be white moms who I'd be like, wow, they look so healthy, so vibrant, and like so young. And I didn't really understand why until I got older. And then I realized, I was like, well, it comes down to, the education, income, awareness of nutrition and health. And I think that because that is lacking in the Black community, then there's naturally this, maybe not an aspiration to be a certain way, if you were getting reached out to by your family, maybe to say, hey, like, you need to, Alexandra, maybe you should lose 10 pounds or whatever, like whatever the case may be, it's because you guys, maybe you had that lens in health and like, you're not being healthy. So maybe there was some good intent behind it too, right? But that's the whole topic in of itself. I think with like the beauty standards, I think a lot of it for Black women, maybe not so much weight. It was, just even hair, you probably hear a lot hair, like for me to wear my hair like this, it's referred to as locks, otherwise known as dreadlocks, but the appropriate term is locks. Took me a lot of courage to finally wear my hair natural. Like I used to wear perms and straighten my hair, to fit the European standard. So I think that as Black women, they're kind of battling all kinds of things. And weight is a part of it, but it's like there's other things, and like hair is a big one in the Black female community, especially like in corporate and different environments. I think that that's a big one. But to your point, I think we also want to be healthy. And I think amongst all races, there's a desire to have this certain type of body. But, as you all know, it's, because we're getting fed by, all the media and all the magazines we grew up. I mean, we don't really touch magazines as much anymore, but, we just had so much. I mean, now it's social media, but we just have so much hitting us. So that's what's driving our desires. But I think that like you mentioned with your friends, it's just as real within the Black community. But from my personal experiences, I would say a lot of it was a desire to be thick.
Does thick mean curvaceous, like small waist, but not skinny? Because that's an ideal that is like very difficult. Just like the ideal, when I was on Baywatch, the ideal was big breasts, but you got to be skinny everywhere else. They didn't really care about butts back then. And that's not very normal. Few women have that naturally, right? Yeah. So thick, tell me what thick is, and it must be, nobody can conform to a single body type because we're all so different.
It's funny because I think I didn't strive for thick because I never could really be. I was never like thick, I don't know. I think thick, if I, Urban Dictionary, but to me, what it means is really like really thick, voluptuous thighs, but really skinny waist. But just the thighs are just big, strong, but real, like just powerful thighs, Okay. And it's okay also to have like a little weight in the stomach. Like that's just like that's like the image I get when I think of thick, but I never aspired for it because I couldn't achieve it anyway. So, when I gained weight, they just all went to my stomach. So I was just like, thick, that's out of reach.
None of them are really attainable. Like, it's like,
I guess social media too, is really tough. What I'm hearing from you is that there's a pulling from different cultures. There's the Black culture who might say, we want thick or bigger thighs and ass, and small waist and curvaceous. But then there's the corporate ideal, which doesn't want you to be too big and wants your hair to be a certain way. Yeah. That must be super. And then, of course, Hollywood, or, people are thin, and it just must be really hard for young girls today. Do you see a lot of girls having a lot of self-hatred for their bodies, like I did when I was, certainly when I was growing up? Most women in America seem to have a real tortured relationship with their body.
Their bodies. I think the players these days, like, for example, I mentioned I have 3 that had, their own issues, but in general, I've had players come to me and say, like, Coach B, I want to get in better shape, or I want to actually lose weight. And again, I stress it more and more. It really comes down to that mindset, because for them, at least, I just feel like they're not in the best, they're not set up for success, so to speak. You're in a college environment, they lack resources. You're around traditional cafes that don't serve them what they need to actually reach their goals. It's a lot of not the best food. I don't even eat there personally, right? So, and then, in general, when it comes to taking care of themselves, a lot of the focus really just becomes, okay, I'm going to rely on practice and our weight sessions to, get the exercise that I need for my body. And they're not thinking to do anything outside of that, which honestly, we do enough where they don't have to do that. But it really just comes back to my earlier point about just they came here with those eating habits. So, on previous road trips, I'll have girls that are the same ones that are like, Coach B, I really want to get into shape and I want to lose weight. But then, I leave them alone because I know not to shame. That's number 1 too, is like, then they're eating cookies and eating a bunch of, junk crap food. And then it's like, okay, well, so when I see this, it ties directly to like my philosophy with health coaching. It's just like, okay, I see this, I want to lose weight talk, but in reality, people are stumped by the fact that they just don't have the relationship with food. They don't see it as fuel. And it just kind of goes back to that. And that's what the girls are dealing with. They want it, they want to be in shape, but then they're doing the things that are going to be the complete opposite. And that's why for me, it's just like, I want them to have the tools that they have now, so that once they're done with basketball, as Dotsie, I'm sure too, it's just like a lot of people, when they're done with sports, that's usually when they gain that weight from all their habits, because now the metabolism's gone and the eating habits are still there that you thought you could just eat because you're always working out. So that's the battle with them now. They want to be in shape, but actions don't match the words, and it's not their fault. I mean, that's you smiling, so that's what it really comes down to. And I was the same way. I was desperately wanting to lose that weight, when I was in college. Ugh.
Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want.
I feel like athletes today, like the ones that are, wanting to do it professionally and make it a career, and certainly not all, but I feel like I'm running into more that are really more focused on what their body can do and deliver versus what it looks like. Where I feel like my early days in road cycling, it was definitely like, if you look this way, then you'll be able to, climb up the mountain faster, which wasn't necessarily true, right? Like it could be for a little while because lighter was better. But you needed, you really needed to be able to develop and grow power, right? And basketball is such a powerful sport. I mean, it looks to me like you need a hell of a lot of power in almost all parts of your body. And I'm wondering if you feel like some athletes, again, it's not a blanket statement, but I'm feeling like today that I'm talking to more athletes that are just much more concerned with what their body can deliver than what it looks like, which is hopeful.
Yeah, that is hopeful. I would say it's a balance. Like I have players that are just kind of focusing on getting stronger. Then I have players that are like, Coach B, I want a bigger butt. And I'm just like, okay, Right. So, and I hear them. Okay. But it's just like,
we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge I mean, I'm always open to hearing that people just want to lose weight because it makes them feel better and sexier. And then, they want to be wanted and all that stuff. That's valid. That's human. I guess the question is, so I think it's important that we don't shame them for that.
100%, because that's when eating disorder starts.
Right.
Because they didn't have the problem until you said it was a problem. And that's that fine line I walk with them, right? When I see them eating things, I don't tell them not to eat something. I always am just like, this is maybe what you can eat. Or Coach B, what are you eating? And I'm like, hey, this is what Coach B is eating for a snack. So you want some dates? Would you like some almonds? I've shared my beef poke with one of the girls and she was like really skeptical. And she's like, oh, tastes like chicken. I was like, okay, take it. I said her name, but she'll be fine. But you know what I mean? So it's those little things, just kind of exposing them to it and not forcing. And I think that's why I struggled in college. So.
Yeah. It's like you have to make it sexy, like, right. Just like anything else. And then it's alluring. You're like, oh, I want what you have. And not the forcing.
Well, it can't be drudgery. It can't be, it can't be deprivation, because eating a whole food, plant-based diet like Becca is recommending is not deprivation. Dotsie, you totally eat that way. So you know that it's not deprivation at all.
Yeah, no doubt. Definitely. Yeah, for sure. And I think I noticed too, I mean, you have a great relationship with food and, and some of that got even enhanced when I went whole food, plant-based, although I was very well from my anorexia by that point. But it feels like, now it's food is fuel and it's my body's settling into whatever it's going to look like, because I'm not willing to put in the work anymore to be powerful like I want to be. But my brain, I want to be and look more powerful than I do, because my default is like my body will just go to looking like thinner and skinnier. And it's so funny, because like I just sought after that for so many years in my eating disorder. And now I'm like, damn it, I just want that powerful look back. But I'm fully aware I'm not willing to do the work to get there. Like
yeah, I know. I hear you.
It's like, okay, I don't know. I think there's some. Now it's like very gratifying to do the work and then have it deliver for your sport, but just have it delivered too for a body type that I feel stronger mentally when I'm in a stronger body.
Yeah.
So, I have to do some work to stay there.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. But we've talked about mindfulness and it's certainly like such a critical component to a healthy lifestyle and to what you teach.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a bit, that's why you started to be a yoga teacher, right? To bring that in, know it's so important. But what to you, what does that really mean on a daily basis to be more mindful?
Yeah. For me, truly mindfulness is about awareness and thoughtfulness, right? And it's having that approach to the things that you do. So having more awareness of ourselves, having more awareness of others, having more awareness of our choices and how they ultimately lead to desired outcomes if you have that awareness. So when I think back to me dealing with my eating disorder, it stemmed from my own lack of awareness. I didn't have the ability to have a great relationship with food because, there was a mental gap. So there wasn't a sense of awareness towards the food that I was ultimately looking to eat. And with the mindfulness piece, it really just tied it back together. It made me say, okay, I'm aware that when I consume this, going back to what we said before, this is how I feel. I don't feel good. Without that awareness, you just kind of keep going. And I think that's why when I speak of mindfulness, I think that's why people will eat things to this day and feel like crap afterwards, and they just continue to do it and they don't stop to question it. And when I say mindfulness is awareness and thoughtfulness, it's like stopping to have that awareness, stopping to say, to think about it, think about what I'm consuming, what I'm doing. And it's more than just in relation to food. To me, it's like just how I live and the choices I make with the things that I do, because there has to be that reasoning behind why you're doing something. And self-awareness is just key and huge. So that's my take on it, because I know it is one of those words out there that are used all the time, just like sustainable, right? It's like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? But really, thoughtfulness, awareness is what I'm really getting at there.
So how does it translate
Beautiful.
with your health coaching clients? What things do you ask them to do so that they can be more mindful? Because just telling someone, I want you to be more aware, works for maybe the first minute after they leave you, and then they forget again. So are there any concrete tasks you ask them to do or things that help them become more aware of what they're eating?
100%. And with anybody I work with, it's never a one size fits all. So like, before I'm even working with people, like I'm doing a whole intake to kind of get a sense of where they're at, what types of things that they're dealing with, what types of stressors they're dealing with, right? Mm-hmm. And once we're having those types of conversations and I have a sense of what they're particularly dealing with, then that's when I can say, okay, based on this, why are you doing that? What's pushing you to do that? What is your reasoning behind doing this? Why do you think it's something that you're continuously doing? And then that's, once I understand those answers, that's when I can give a tip on how to become more aware. And that's my biggest one, which is very traditional, is the journaling. And mine is not just, I want you to do your food journal. I'm big on gratitude journaling and regular journaling so they can get a sense of their thoughts. The food journaling will show you concrete, what are you consuming? What does that look like? The gratitude journaling is kind of centering yourself back into gratitude, because that is what's so important. And if you can live your life like that, everything just is abundant. You just have an abundant mindset, and developing that, because not everybody has that mindset. Some people do already. But then with the regular journaling, that's when they can uncover blockers, what's holding them back. And they're able to look back at that and reflect and see what is, keeping them in this state. So that awareness is me, like, it's not like necessarily me saying, working with me is going to make you aware. I'm going to give you the tools and the tips to allow yourself to come to that awareness on your own. And that's just like my approach, and just my whole coaching philosophy is like, yeah, you might be coming to me because you want to lose weight or you want to improve your relationship with food. But my biggest philosophy is really just getting to the root of what's holding you back from reaching your goals. And then us discussing like the strategies and the tips that you need to take to move forward so that you don't need me anymore. You know what I mean? That's why it's only 90 days. I want to give you everything that I've learned from my own personal experiences, the books that I've read, the certifications that I've acquired, so that it doesn't have to take you as long as it took me. So, that's my approach. And that's how I kind of infuse that awareness piece in there too. It's just helping them become more in tune with themselves, because we all already have the answers, and that's why I'm glad there's multiple health coaches. Like Alexandra, I'm glad you're a coach too. We need more of us out there, because we can't help everybody. So it's one of those things where really just helping people come into tune with who they are, and then allowing them to figure out the next steps so that they can do it in a sustainable way, right? With the sustainable, so they can do it on their own.
Just a note to self, or note to everybody. I used to be a health coach, but I recently closed my business just a few months ago because of taking care of my mom. But the principles of health coaching are so important, and you've touched on a lot of them. Awareness of why, triggers, and environment is something that I saw on your website that you help people with during the 90-day program that you have. Can you tell us a little bit about how you help people change their environment so they can make better choices? Yeah,
some people might be in situations where the environment is a really, really tricky one, right? So we might have to focus on like really what's in their control, given like financial situations or things like that. So the number
Family,
one,
other people in the house.
exactly, right? Kids, husband, whatever the case, wife. So first and foremost, it's okay. We do that fridge and pantry makeover. And Dotsie, I think I checked out your page. You have some great content on that too, just as far as helping people out with that. Mm-hmm. So it kind of goes back to, okay, what's in there? What can we slowly swap out? Because I'm not one of those like, makeover. No, because that's just not realistic. What do I do with this? It's like slowly introducing things. That's why that coaching relationship is so one-on-one, because everybody's different. Everybody likes different foods. So it's about understanding like, okay, you like consuming this? Try this instead. Or you really want to create some type of sauce and you really love this sauce? Let me work on making you a plant-based version of that sauce. I can come up with something for you and I'll make it. And this is going to be your go-to sauce for this. Oh, go ahead.
Let me ask you a quick question just before we move on to the pantry.
Okay.
Because you guys mentioned challenging household and luckily my husband was like, oh, this makes sense and did it with me. But I just can't, it's hard to imagine now, as deep as I'm in, to not be with someone in a household that all of it is safe and I don't have it. So for someone that's like, hey, I've got the challenging household, when you talk about the cabinets in the pantry, do you say, create your own cabinet and pantry? Because if it's just going to, let's say you have, a couple, 3, 4 kids, 2 kids, whatever, and they're eating whatever, and hubby or wife is eating whatever, or partner, and it's just all still there right there in front of you. So how do people, I've always wondered that, like how they can create their, I don't know, safe space, their safe food space.
So your question, it depends, because it depends on who they're with and how supportive they are. Right. There might be people who are like, I don't want to try this. You can try it. If it works, I might try it with you. And that's just what it is. And if that's the case, then yes, you'll have your own little section. But otherwise, typically, oftentimes women are kind of in control of what everybody's eating. So you can slowly incorporate things in.
Just force it on them.
Yeah. Right. You can pick up those snacks. You can pick up those healthy alternative snacks. You can bring more fruit and dates into the house and just more nuts and things. If the allergies aren't there, things like that. You could bring those things in. There's tons of alternatives. So to your question, that's my approach. It really depends on their dynamics. And then kind of going back to the challenging environment, I'm a big believer. If you're single, try to attract someone that's on your same frequency, trying to strive towards a healthy lifestyle. Seriously. Otherwise, there's going to be some conflict and you might outgrow this person in this area. Now, if you're already with somebody and they love you, be an inspiration. And, that's why you see so many successful stories where the one person was successful and then their partner got on the train and then maybe their kids were even successful. I think today more than ever, especially with kids, what I've seen with coaching at different levels is the kids want to be healthy. This isn't, my clients aren't kids, but I just as a side note, I've seen kids want to be healthy and they're encouraging their parents to bring more foods in. But then it goes back to that lack of awareness of what that really means because of our society and the programming and what's being put out there and all the commercials and all that good stuff. But long story short, that is my approach with clients. It's focusing on the pantry, focusing on the refrigerator, and then seeing, depending on the relationship dynamics, what changes can be made. And I'm really big on encouraging people to let go of what doesn't serve them. If you have people that are completely unsupportive in your life, you have to take a deeper soul searching look at that. I'm not going to be the one to advise you to make a decision, by no means, but you have to do some inner work. That goes back to the journaling. How do you feel when this person says that, you have to figure those things out. And I think that's the biggest piece to Alexandra's point earlier, right? Just like, when you had these battles, what else was it? Because it's not just the food. The food is just the coping mechanism, right? So
always.
So then if some people went with this, and that's why the mindfulness thing again, right? The awareness and the thoughtfulness, it goes back to sometimes people figure out what else they need to change in their life, not just what's going on their plate, but some other things too that are very personal.
It's pretty heavy what you're saying, but it's true. Sometimes people can recognize that maybe they're keeping themselves unhealthy for their partner so their partner doesn't feel threatened. Why are they letting their kids eat unhealthily when they know it's unhealthy? It's not good for their kids. Maybe they're being too permissive as parents. They need to look at that. I mean, there's so much that we have to look at ourselves when it comes to food, because it's a Like I tell my clients who just want to lose weight, it's really not about the food. And my therapist used to say that to me, and I did not believe her. I was like, no, it's about the food. If I got the food in control, everything else will be just fine. Well, I had to learn to change myself before I could get the food under control and eating the way I wanted. And it's, my friend Tom, hi, Tom. I don't even know if he listens to this podcast. I've known him since, oh my God, almost 40 years now. He lost 80 pounds and then he was single and he found a woman who'd lost 100 pounds. She'd lost it on Weight Watcher. He'd lost it with a nutritionist. And he mentioned to me once, they really help each other because it's been like they've been together 10 years or something and they have kept it off. And it's because they both support each other and they really, work together. And they have a household that supports that. Yeah. So, but what do you do I have had clients who have wonderful partners that are wonderful, but they don't eat that healthily. And it's hard. It's hard, but it's not impossible. And often we can make excuses that it's because of our partner. I remember when I was throwing up, when I was binging, I would say, if only I could be by myself and not have any stress. I would go to a hotel and be alone. And guess who would go into a super binge? Alexandra, because she had to be with herself, because in the end, it was really all just about me. Yep. I couldn't get away from me. So, really, I'm digressing, but so tell us, as Becca, as you have this 3-month program, you talked about mindfulness and journaling, the pantry. Yep. What else? You mentioned cooking, and what else do you?
Cooking is a big part of it, especially with my background. That's why I got into the culinary realm. I might open a restaurant one day. We'll see. It's like in one of those things. But with the cooking piece, it's really about encouraging them to make simple dishes. And I'm not one to throw recipes at people. I give some recipes out in my program, but it's about what you enjoy. And then us getting creative and saying, okay, what are your 3 main go-to dishes for lunch or dinner? And then let's tweak those so that they can be perfect for you. Like I said with the sauce, like, what's a salad dressing sauce that you love? Let's tweak this. Boom. This is your sauce, girl. Or what is a pasta sauce that you like? Ooh, okay, let's do this. Oh, you don't want to use nuts? Let's make it with this instead. So I can't have a one size fits all with that approach with the food. And it really depends on them because everybody has their own flavor profiles and what they prefer. Also, to the point that we're discussing right now, it's about breaking negative patterns and really uncovering those, because sometimes we're so bogged down, we don't really know what they are. So we work through that. Again, developing the food awareness, understanding what they're consuming right now and how that's affecting them. And then, enhancing positive self-talk and affirmations. I do it with my players too. Like, that is the number one. It's that belief. It's that energy that you're creating for yourself. It's a frequency that you vibrate on daily. And, that's when that self-care really begins. You have to believe and you have to be telling yourself the right things. And we can all think back to our disorders. We weren't telling ourselves the best things. And that's why some of those things continued. And it really took us really believing in ourselves, changing our thoughts to really get there. So those are some of the things I focus on so that they can get the right results. And I'm a huge believer that the universe, like why you ladies are on this podcast together, the universe takes our pains, allows us to conquer them. And then we say, I don't want other people to go through this. I don't want people to have to deal with what I dealt with. So let me help them. So that, is really why I do what I do. And that is just my approach. And that's why it becomes natural. And that's how I've ended up here.
So for all of those people, where can they find you? And please mention some of your like hot tip sheets that you have, like your worksheets with tips and your coaching site and anything else.
Yeah. So number one, you can follow me. You can connect with me on Instagram. I'll be posting daily tips, to help you on your weight loss journey and, improve your relationship with food. So at official Becca Serenity. But then you can also, to your point, you can, in the show notes, I'm sharing a free PDF on how to never count calories again. Because trust me, you don't need to. So there's that. And then the third, I would say another way, you can just check out my website, beccaserenity.com, and you can learn more as well. So, yeah.
Yay.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for helping so many people out of your pain and your experience, and for being on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you both for having me. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate it.